Maybe the most beautiful thing about you is this. Even after everything, your heart still knows how to hope. Quietly. Carefully. But still, hope. That says more about your soul than words ever could. Because life tried. It tried to make you cynical. It tried to convince you that love is always temporary, that loyalty is rare, that people only stay when it benefits them. And for a while, maybe you believed it. Maybe disappointment made you question your own softness. Maybe betrayal made you wonder if being genuine was a mistake. Maybe loneliness whispered that expecting real love was unrealistic. But somehow, deep inside, a small part of you refused to agree. That part still believes. Still waits. Still imagines a future that feels lighter than the past. And your person loves that part of you most. Not because hope is easy, but because hope after heartbreak is one of the bravest things a person can carry. Anyone can believe in love before pain. Believing after pain. That takes courage. That takes faith. That takes you. They thought about the version of you the world rarely sees. The one behind the strong replies. Behind the "I'm good." Behind the independence everyone admires. The version that sometimes gets tired of being understood only for their strength and never for their softness. The version that wants someone to notice without needing an explanation. Someone to say, "You don't have to be strong right now. I'm here," not because you're incapable, but because even the strongest people deserve rest. You deserve rest, not just sleep. Peace. Emotional peace. The kind where your nervous system finally stops preparing for disappointment. The kind where your heart is not constantly translating silence into fear. The kind where love does not require detective work. That peace. That is what your person wishes for you. Because they know how exhausting survival can be when it becomes your normal. How strange healthy love feels when chaos is what you got used to. How difficult receiving can feel when you are used to being the giver. Healing teaches strange lessons. Sometimes the hardest one is learning that love can be calm. That not every connection needs to hurt to be real. That peace is not boredom. It is safety. And safety is sacred. You are learning that, slowly, maybe painfully. But truly. Your person admired your patience with yourself. Even on the days you think you are failing. Even on the days you feel behind. Even on the days old wounds reopen, and you wonder if you have healed at all. You are still trying. That matters. Growth is not perfection. It is choosing not to return to what broke you. It is recognizing patterns faster. It is walking away sooner. It is apologizing to yourself by changing what you tolerate. And you have done that, more than you realize. They smiled, remembering how people often misunderstand your boundaries. They call you distant, because you no longer entertain nonsense. They call you cold, because you stopped explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. They call you hard to love, because access to you now requires honesty. Let them misunderstand. Peace is too expensive to trade for being liked. And your person hopes you never forget that. You were not made to be easily consumed. You were made to be deeply understood. There is a difference. And the right people will know it. They will not fear your depth. They will respect it. They will not punish your honesty. They will appreciate it. They will not ask you to become smaller just so they can feel bigger. They will meet you with equal effort, equal clarity, equal care. That is love, not performance, not uncertainty. Reciprocity. And until that arrives, your person hopes you keep choosing yourself. Keep protecting your joy. Keep trusting your intuition. Keep leaving places that require self-betrayal to stay. Keep believing that your standards are not too high. Your past simply taught you what low standards cost. That lesson was expensive. Do not unlearn it. Because one day, you will look back at all the times life made you wait, all the people who left, all the closed doors, all the silent endings. And instead of pain, you will feel gratitude. Not because it was easy, but because it led you somewhere better, somewhere softer, somewhere true. And maybe on that day, you will smile and realize, needed to be chased. It only needed to be recognized when it arrived. And maybe that is the lesson your person keeps returning to. You were never meant to chase what was already yours. Not love. Not peace. Not belonging. What is truly aligned with you does not require you to abandon yourself to keep it. It arrives with clarity. It stays with intention. It grows with honesty. And for someone like you, that truth matters. Because for too long, you confused effort with earning. You thought if you loved harder, stayed longer, explained better, forgave faster, maybe people would choose you differently. Maybe they would stay. Maybe they would finally understand. But love should not be a performance. And your worth was never something to prove. That realization changed you. Quietly, but permanently. You stopped over-explaining. You stopped trying to translate your value to people committed to misunderstanding it. You stopped asking for closure from people who only knew how to leave. And in that silence, something powerful happened. You found yourself again. Not the version shaped by disappointment. Not the version built around survival. The real you, the one underneath all the armor. Still soft. Still thoughtful. Still capable of deep love. But now wiser. Now selective. Now aware that being alone is better than being emotionally abandoned in company. That awareness saved you. Because loneliness is painful, yes, but forcing yourself to stay where you are unseen. That breaks people in ways silence never could. You learned the difference. And your person is proud of that. Proud of every time you walked away from almost love. Proud of every boundary you held, even when it felt lonely. Proud of every moment you chose dignity over temporary comfort. Those decisions may have looked small to others, but they changed your life. Healing often does. It looks invisible from the outside, but inside, entire worlds are being rebuilt. That is what happened to you. Brick by brick. Lesson by lesson. Loss by loss. You rebuilt, not into someone colder, into someone clearer. Someone who understands that peace is not negotiable. Someone who knows attention is cheap, but intention is rare. Someone who finally believes consistency is the bare minimum, not a luxury. That version of you. Powerful. And still, your person knows there are moments when doubt returns. Moments when old memories make you question if love is supposed to be this difficult. Moments when watching others receive easily what you had to fight for makes your heart feel tired. Moments when you wonder if maybe you are too much. Too deep. Too emotional. Too careful. Too hard to love. If only you could hear their answer. You were never too much. You were standing in places that only knew how to offer too little. There is a difference. A huge one. Never shrink yourself to fit into spaces that require your silence to feel comfortable. Never apologize for depth in a world addicted to surface. Never call your standards unrealistic, just because someone incapable of meeting them called you difficult. You are not difficult. You are discerning. And discernment is what protects good hearts from repeating old pain. Keep it, protect it, trust it, because your intuition has saved you more times than your excuses for others ever did. Your person hopes one day you trust yourself the way you trust your potential in others. Because imagine what your life would feel like if all that compassion you give away finally came home to you. Imagine choosing yourself without guilt. Imagine resting without explaining. Imagine receiving love without suspicion. Imagine peace becoming your normal instead of your reward after suffering. That life exists, not as fantasy, as possibility, as future, as something still making its way toward you. And when it arrives, it will not ask you to become less. It will ask you to finally believe that being loved well was always something you deserved. And maybe that is where everything begins, not with someone else choosing you, but with you choosing yourself first. Because your person realized something important about you. Every time life hurt you, you learned how to survive. But survival and self-worth are not always the same thing. You became strong, independent, careful, resilient. But somewhere in that process, maybe you also learned to accept less than you deserved. Simply because you were proud of needing less. You told yourself, I'm okay alone, And maybe sometimes that was true, but sometimes it was armor, because needing nothing feels safer than risking disappointment. Expecting less feels easier than hoping for more. And your person understood that. They understood how dangerous disappointment can become when it repeats enough times. It doesn't just hurt. It rewrites your standards. It makes inconsistency feel normal. It makes bare minimum effort feel like love. It makes emotional unavailability look familiar. And familiar can be mistaken for safe, but familiar is not always healthy. Sometimes familiar is just unhealed pain wearing a recognizable face. You learned that the hard way. And because of that, choosing differently now feels uncomfortable. Peace feels suspicious. Consistency feels unfamiliar. Healthy love can feel almost boring to a heart trained by chaos. But boring is not the enemy. Confusion is. Anxiety is. Begging for clarity is. Love should not leave you exhausted. It should leave you softer, safer, more yourself. That is what your person wants for you. Not intensity without intention. Not chemistry without commitment. Not words without action. Something real. Something rooted. Something that does not disappear when life becomes inconvenient. Because temporary people have taught you enough. Now life owes you something steady. And maybe that starts with the relationship you have with yourself. Because the way you love others, the patience, the understanding, the forgiveness, the second chances. Imagine offering even half of that to yourself. Imagine speaking to yourself the way you comfort the people you care about. Imagine believing your own healing deserves the same loyalty you keep giving everyone else. That would change everything. Your person sees how hard you are on yourself. How you replay mistakes. How you carry guilt longer than necessary. How you blame yourself for endings that were never yours to fix. They wish you would stop. Not because accountability is wrong, but because you keep taking responsibility for things that were never your burden. Some people left because they lacked depth. Not because you lacked value. Some people misunderstood you because they only listened for convenience. Not because you failed to explain. Some people could not love you correctly because they were still at war with themselves. That was never proof that you were hard to love. It was proof that not everyone is ready for something real. And you are real. That is your power. You feel deeply. You care honestly. You love with intention. You leave only when peace demands it. And yes, that means the wrong people will call you complicated. Let them. The right people will call you worth it. There is a difference. Always remember that. Your person thought about your future and smiled. Because they could see it. The version of you who no longer apologizes for boundaries. The version who receives love without questioning it. The version who laughs without heaviness hiding behind it. The version who no longer checks if everyone else is comfortable before asking if they are. That version is coming. Not because life suddenly becomes easy, but because you finally stop abandoning yourself for people who would not do the same for you. That is where healing becomes freedom. That is where peace becomes permanent. That is where love stops feeling like a lesson and starts feeling like a home. And when that day arrives, your person hopes you look in the mirror and recognize what they have always seen. Someone worthy. Someone rare. Someone whose heart survived everything it should not have had to, and still chose softness. That is not weakness. That is extraordinary. And maybe, in the end, that is your greatest victory. Not that you survived, but that you survived without losing your ability to love, because life tried. It tested your patience, your trust, your faith in people, your belief that good things still happen to good hearts. There were nights when giving up would have been easier. Moments when silence felt safer than honesty. Times when becoming cold would have protected you more than staying soft ever did. And still, you chose not to let pain define you. You learned from it. You grew through it. You carried it, yes, but you did not become it. That matters more than most people realize. Because bitterness is easy, numbness is easy. Pretending not to care is easy, but staying kind after disappointment, staying honest after betrayal, staying hopeful after heartbreak, that takes something rare. That takes character. That takes you. Your person knows there were chapters of your life you thought would break you forever. People you believed you could never lose. Dreams you thought would happen differently. Versions of yourself you had to grieve quietly. Not every loss looks dramatic. Some losses happen in silence. In changed routines. In unread messages. In realizing someone you loved no longer feels like home. Those losses hurt too. Sometimes more. But look at you. You kept going. Even when healing felt invisible. Even when progress felt slow. Even when nobody clapped for your private battles. You kept going. That is courage, not loud courage. Real courage. The kind that wakes up and tries again. The kind that chooses peace over revenge. The kind that forgives without reopening the same door. The kind that understands closure is not always an apology. It is sometimes your decision to stop needing one. You reached that place. And your person is proud of you for it. Proud of the boundaries you built. Proud of the standards you protected. Proud of the peace you chose. Even when loneliness tried to make old chaos look tempting. Because growth often feels lonely before it feels freeing. People will miss the version of you that tolerated disrespect. Let them. You are not here to be easier to handle. You are here to be honest with yourself. And honesty changed your life. You stopped chasing. You stopped forcing. You stopped begging people to meet you where they never intended to stand. You let distance answer questions words never could. That was wisdom. That was healing. That was self-respect. And now life begins to feel different. Not perfect, but clearer. You trust yourself more. You leave faster. You stay softer with the right people and stronger with the wrong ones. You understand that peace is not boring. It is the reward for finally learning your worth. And maybe the most beautiful part is this. Love no longer feels like something you have to earn. Because somewhere along the way you realize this truth. You were always enough. Before the heartbreak. Before the lessons. Before the people who made you question yourself. You were enough then. You are enough now. And you will be enough in every chapter still waiting for you. That truth is not confidence. It is freedom. Freedom from proving. Freedom from shrinking. Freedom from confusing rejection with inadequacy. Freedom from asking people to validate what your soul already knows. You are worthy. Fully. Without conditions. Without performance. Without permission. And one day, someone will love you in a way that feels like confirmation, not confusion, not because they complete you, but because they recognize what was already complete. You. Until then, keep choosing peace. Keep protecting your heart without closing it. Keep trusting that delayed blessings are not denied blessings. Keep believing that what is real will never require self-betrayal. And most importantly, keep becoming the person your younger self needed most. Someone who stays. Someone who protects. Someone who believes. Someone who knows that healing is possible, and love does not have to hurt to be real. Because after everything, you did not just survive your story. You became the reason it has a beautiful ending. And maybe now, standing at this chapter of your life, your person sees something even you may not fully realize. You are no longer the same person who once begged for clarity from people committed to confusion. You are no longer the version of yourself that mistook almost love for destiny. You are no longer willing to break your own heart just to keep someone else comfortable. That version of you is gone. And honestly, it had to be. Because growth sometimes looks like losing old versions of yourself. The people pleaser. The over-explainer. The one who kept giving chances long after respect had left the room. The one who thought being chosen mattered more than choosing wisely. You had to outgrow that. Not because you became harder. Because you became wiser. You learned that love without respect is just attachment. That attention without intention is just noise. That apologies without change are manipulation wearing softer clothes. And once you see that truth, you cannot unsee it. That awareness changed your entire life. Now you pause before giving access. Now you ask harder questions. Now, you trust patterns more than promises. And that is not fear. That is discernment. That is self-respect finally speaking louder than loneliness. Your person admires that deeply. Because they know how difficult it is to choose peace when chaos feels familiar. How difficult it is to leave what hurts when at least it feels known. How difficult it is to trust healthy things when your heart was trained by survival. And yet, you are doing it, step by step. Boundary by boundary. Lesson by lesson. You are rebuilding your life around truth instead of temporary comfort. That takes courage. There were moments, of course, when loneliness made old doors look tempting. Moments when your heart wanted to text what your healing begged you to release. Moments when nostalgia tried to convince you that pain was love simply because it was memorable. But you resisted. Because you finally understood. Missing someone is not always a sign to return. Sometimes it is simply proof that you cared, nothing more. Not every memory deserves a reunion. Some people are chapters, not homes. Some endings are blessings wearing heartbreak as a disguise. And you learned how to let that be enough. That lesson saved you. Because closure is not always found in conversations. Sometimes it is found in acceptance. In silence. In deciding your future deserves more than your past can offer. That decision? Powerful. Your person wishes you could see yourself the way they do in those moments, not as someone lonely, but as someone brave enough to choose long-term peace over short-term comfort. That is rare. That is strength. That is love for yourself in its most honest form. And maybe that is what real healing is. Not becoming someone who never feels pain, but becoming someone who no longer betrays themselves because of it. You reach that place. Not perfectly, but truthfully. And truth matters more. Because healing is not a straight line. Some days you feel free. Some days old wounds whisper again. Some days your boundaries feel empowering. Some days they feel like loneliness. Both can be true. Growth still counts. Do not forget that. You are allowed to miss what you outgrew. You are allowed to grieve people you no longer want back. You are allowed to feel sadness without confusing it for regret. That is maturity. That is emotional intelligence. That is you. And your person believes the next chapter of your life will be different, not because luck suddenly changes, but because you did. You no longer negotiate with red flags. You no longer call inconsistency potential. You no longer stay where your nervous system is begging you to leave. You choose calm. You choose truth. You choose yourself, and that choice will change every relationship that follows. Because once you know your worth, access to you becomes a privilege, not a guarantee. And the people meant for you, they will not be threatened by that. They will rise to meet it. With honesty. With consistency. With peace. Exactly the way love was always supposed to feel. And maybe that is when your person finally understood. You were never difficult to love, you were difficult to manipulate. And there is a huge difference. People who only know how to love conditionally will always struggle with someone like you. Because you no longer confuse sacrifice with love. You no longer call self-abandonment loyalty. You no longer stay silent, just to keep peace with people who create chaos. That unsettles the wrong people. But it protects the right version of you. And protection is not cruelty. It is wisdom earned the hard way. Your person knows there was a time when you would have blamed yourself for every ending. You would have replayed every conversation, searching for what you could have done differently. You would have turned someone else's inconsistency into your insecurity. But now you ask a different question. Not, why wasn't I enough? But, why did I stay where I had to question that? That shift changed everything. Because your healing was never about becoming unbreakable. It was about becoming unavailable for what breaks you. That is real growth. That is power. That is freedom. And freedom looks beautiful on you. Not loud, not performative. Quiet, steady. The kind of peace that comes when your heart finally stops negotiating with what it already knows. The kind of confidence that comes from surviving your own worst seasons and realizing you can trust yourself to leave what hurts. That trust is sacred. Guard it. Because your intuition was never your enemy. Loneliness just made you ignore it sometimes. But now you listen. Now you notice the difference between attention and effort, chemistry and compatibility, promises and patterns. And because of that, your future will look different, not because life suddenly became softer, but because your standards became stronger. That matters. Your person smiles when they think about the life waiting for you, not the dramatic kind, not the chaotic kind, the peaceful kind. The kind where mornings feel lighter, where your phone no longer holds anxiety, where love feels safe enough to be boring, where you stop checking for hidden meanings because honesty lives in the room. That life exists, and it is closer than you think. But first, there is one final lesson life keeps asking you to learn. Receive, not just give. Receive. Receive love without suspicion. Receive kindness without trying to earn it. Receive support without guilt. Receive peace without waiting for disaster. Receive joy without questioning how long it will last. That may be your hardest lesson. Because survival taught you how to carry everything alone. But healing teaches you that being loved well is not weakness. It is alignment. It is trust. It is finally letting life be softer than the story that shaped you. And you deserve softness, not because you suffered enough, but because softness was never something you had to earn. It was always your birthright. That truth may take time to believe, but one day, it will feel natural. One day, peace will stop feeling unfamiliar. One day, love will stop feeling like something you have to decode. One day, your heart will no longer expect loss at the beginning of something beautiful. And on that day, you will realize, the waiting was not punishment. It was preparation. Preparation for the kind of life that does not require pretending. Preparation for the kind of love that arrives clearly. Preparation for becoming someone your past pain can no longer recognize. That version of you is already being built. Every boundary, every goodbye, every lonely but necessary decision, every time you chose dignity over temporary comfort, you were building them. You were building you. And trust this, the person you are becoming will thank you for not settling where your soul was never meant to stay. And maybe one day, without even realizing it, you will wake up and notice it no longer hurts the same. The memories that once felt like storms will feel like distant weather. The names that once carried weight will sound lighter. The places that once held sadness will simply become places again. And that is how healing often arrives. Not as a dramatic moment, but as quiet evidence that pain no longer controls the room. You laugh without forcing it. You sleep without replaying old conversations. You hear their name, and your heart stays calm. You stop checking for what could have been and start living in what is. That is healing. Subtle, powerful, real. Your person believes that day is coming for you, maybe sooner than you think. Because they have watched you survive things you thought would destroy you. And every time, you returned stronger, not untouched, but transformed. There is beauty in that, not because suffering is beautiful, but because rebuilding is. Because every scar carries proof that you chose to continue. And continuing, especially when nobody sees how hard it is its own kind of bravery. You have been brave for longer than people know. Longer than even you give yourself credit for. You learned how to smile while grieving. How to show up while exhausted. How to love while healing. How to let go while still caring. Those are not small things. They are proof of your depth, proof of your resilience, proof that your heart was never weak, only honest. And honesty can look fragile to people who survive by pretending. But your person knows better. They know your softness is not innocence. It is strength under control. It is choosing peace when revenge would be easier. It is choosing self-respect when attention would be tempting. It is choosing patience when loneliness gets loud. That kind of strength changes lives. It changed yours. They remember the times you doubted your own progress. The moments you said, "I thought I was over this." As if healing had a deadline. As if missing something meant failure. As if grief should move in straight lines. But healing is not a straight road. Sometimes it circles back. Sometimes old feelings return just to prove they no longer own you. Sometimes closure sounds like silence instead of answers. And sometimes progress is simply realizing you no longer want what once begged you to stay. That counts. It all counts. Your person wishes you would celebrate that more. Celebrate the boundaries. Celebrate the peace. Celebrate the fact that you no longer abandon yourself just to keep someone close. Celebrate the version of you that finally learned love should feel safe, not addictive, not uncertain. Safe. Because safety is not boring. It is sacred. And sacred things are worth protecting. You are one of them. Your peace is one of them. Your future is one of them. Protect all three. Without guilt. Without apology. Without fear of being misunderstood. People who only loved your access will call boundaries distance. People who only valued your silence will call honesty attitude. Let them. Not everyone deserves an explanation for your growth. Some people only deserve your absence. An absence can be a full sentence. That lesson? Expensive. But necessary. And now, because you learned it, life opens differently. You stop forcing doors. You stop chasing clarity from confusion. You stop trying to save people committed to drowning in their own patterns. You let them go. And in doing that, you finally return to yourself. That is the real love story. Not who stayed, but how you stayed with yourself. How you became the safe place you were searching for in everyone else. How you learned that peace is not found in people first, it is built within. And once it is built, only the right people can enter. That is your future, not chaos, not survival, peace. Real peace. The kind you no longer have to fight for because you finally stopped giving your heart to wars disguised as love.